Welcome to episode 3 of the Property Hustle podcast. And in today's episode, I want us to talk about why affordable housing fails even before the first block is laid. For a lot of people, when you talk of affordable housing, the discussion of affordable housing comes up. The first thing that comes to mind is cement, is blocks, is iron, and all the materials that are needed or that are used to build a house. Meanwhile, I realized that the problem of affordable housing even starts way, way back, long before even the conception of the building or, deciding to even build a house, right? The discussion of the problem of affordable housing starts way before that. It starts with a definition of what truly is affordable housing. Last week, a Facebook user, a follower, and a friend asked a question, under a post I made when I talked about affordable housing and the need for us to talk more about affordable housing. And the question he asked was that I should tell him, like, what range did I think a house, a rental accommodation would be that I would consider it affordable, considering that, affordability is subjective. And that question, actually, on the surface, it sounds so easy. But the more I looked, I consider it deeply, I realized that the questions around affordable housing is not really a straightforward question because, like that question now, what range are you going to consider that a house is affordable? In the response I gave there, I attempted to, say my own mind, even though I said anything from 100K, and above and all that. That happens to even be from my own perspective. Because at the end of the day, the question remains, to whom is a house affordable to? Because that was my own perspective. Now, I don't know his own perspective. I don't know the perspective of other people. Because you see, what is affordable to one person might not be affordable to another person. And that brings me to, the first lens, from where I want to view this affordability discussion from, which is personal affordability. You understand? That question of the relativity or the subjective nature of affordability is true, because what is affordable to one person might not be affordable to another person. Now, for somebody like that is earning 5 million naira in a month, for instance, a house of 1 million naira, of 2 million naira to that person is a very, very cheap property. Is very, very affordable. And so if the person is in Abuja, for instance, and they said the house is, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, the price ranges from 1 million to 2 million to 3 million, the person is just not going to have stress over that. The person is going to consider that houses in Abuja or in Nigeria are affordable. But how about somebody that is maybe earning 200K in a month, for instance, and the person is to rent an accommodation that costs maybe 500K? That person is going to find it very, very difficult. So that person, houses in Abuja or houses in Nigeria are not affordable because by the time the person considers other costs associated with living, because it's not just house, the person is going to survive, he's going to live. Even when the person rents the accommodation, he's going to pay agency, pay legal, pay all that costs, and talk about moving into the property, which are all costs that adds up. So to that person, the question of affordability is not just going to be around, that easy for the person. The person is going to consider a 500K accommodation, for instance, to be very, very expensive. And so affordability in that sense is very, very relative. It's very, very subjective. And so now what determines affordability in that sense? It's not easy to put a figure to it. But now what happens is that where we can now have like a closure in that regard is in the fact that if the people are able to live better, if the people are able to have more means or better means of livelihood, you realize that the affordability in that sense, the problem narrows. Because for somebody who, like I said, is earning 200K, if his means or how he earns his earnings improve to maybe like 400K, 500K, and the house is now still hovers around that range, you see that to that person, definition of affordability, it changes, because more houses can become more affordable for that individual. And so there are different, aspects to look at that when you talk of personal affordability. But then we now have another lens with which we can also view affordability in, which I would call it market affordability, right? Now, in this market affordability, it's just going to be around whether the houses that are being provided, that if they are suitable to really serve the market that they are meant for. For instance, when you come to Abuja, for instance, you have different categories of people, you have different classes of people, with different means of livelihood. You have like the civil servants, for instance, you have the police, you have the teachers, you have the young professionals that are just trying to make ends meet, that are just starting life. So now, for instance, if we have we provide like 20 million houses in Abuja, let's say in year 2026, for instance. Now, it's easy for somebody to say, okay, let's say this information comes from the government, from the government of the FCT, that okay, this year we've been able to provide 20 million housing, we've been able to provide 50 million housing. To them and to a lot of people, it will begin to sound like, yeah, they're actually solving the problem. The houses are being provided. But the question now becomes, are those houses really suitable for the people that need the houses? Now, in a market where you have a lot of people looking for one bedroom flats, two bedroom flats to rent, like people that starting life, people that don't have so much money that they just want a place that they can just put their heads. And what is being provided are all those duplexes and all the big houses and everything. So are we going to say the houses are being provided and so we now have affordability in that sense? It's not going to be. So what you have in this case is, a mismatch between what is provided and what is needed. And so in that case, you now have a case whereby you have a lot and you still don't have. That is a very serious dilemma. And so in my opinion, what I think in that regard is that, for developers, for individuals that are building houses, investors, my thinking is, instead of building that duplex, that luxurious home that you're trying to build, thinking of the future that okay, if I build it now, I can put it for rent, and then let's say in the future I can sell it for even a bigger money and all of that. Why not think about the need of the people? Why not think about what the market truly needs? Instead of the duplexes and the big houses, why not think about block of flats, or the different type of houses that the people need? Most people need one bedroom flat to live. They need two bedroom flats. There are very few people that need a duplex to rent. Very, very few people. So instead of now committing, for instance, like 200 million to build a mansion, a duplex somewhere, how about you commit that same amount of money, maybe on that same plot of land, and build blocks of flats? Now, 200 million builds one duplex for one family. Now, if you now commit that same 200 million, it will build maybe 6 flats, 8 flats. That is for 6 families, for 6 people, for 8 people. And now, in that case, when we're now talking about affordability in that case, you are already reducing the number, because it's now about the law of demand and supply. Once we have one and there are 10 people that needs that one, you have more demand and less supply. But now when you now convert that one that you're supposed to build and you convert it to 6 or to 8, now you now have 8 units available for 8 people out of the 10. That means that the demand is reducing. And the law says that if the demand reduces, then the cost also reduces. And now in that case, we can now begin to talk of affordability. We can now begin to now have the discussion about affordability. If not, for as long as we have this housing, that mismatch between what is provided and what is desired, we are going to continue to have that problem of affordability. And so my proposition is, for the developers, the private developers, for individuals, for investors, for people that want to commit money to build houses, instead of building those mansions, please consider building what the market needs. It's not the duplex. And that is why you see that a lot of times you have these duplexes, they're not being rented for a very, very long time. Sometimes for months or even years, they're not being rented. You are just struggling. You call this agent, you call that one. You're trying to get it rented, but it's not possible, because the people that need these houses, they are very, very few. That is the type of house you've built, the duplex, the mansions that you've built. They are very, very few. So if you now convert that money, you convert that means, that resources, to building something that the people need, you are solving a lot of problems. So the discussion around affordability, around affordable housing, you will now be a champion. You'll now be at the center, at the forefront of solving that problem. And in fact, if we even talk about the return, you stand to gain more building the houses, the type of houses that the people, that the populace needs, than building a house that just a few class of people that needs. I understand it's about preference and all of that, but I want you to have a rethink. And so that is that part of market affordability. And then there's the last part I want to talk about in this episode is the national affordability. When we talk of national affordability, we'll now begin to talk of the government. We'll now begin to talk of the financial institutions, the mortgage institutions. We'll now begin to talk of the plots, the infrastructures that are being provided. Is the government or the people at the helms of their affairs, the people in authority, are they able to provide the structure, the necessary structure that can help, that can help to further the discussion around affordability, around affordable housing. And so that is when we're talking about the national affordability. And so the first thing you talk about, is plot, is land. Because before you talk of any development, you have to first of all start with land. The land, how are the lands provided? Are the lands available? What is the ease with which people can, access this land? Now, government, they said, is for the people are the government. And so you now think that if the land belongs to the government, that the government only rent it to the people, just like we know. Now, that means the people also own the land because the government, is the people. So how easy is it for an ordinary Nigerian, a regular citizen to just walk into maybe an agency, an office somewhere and just apply for a plot? That, okay, I've got like 5 million, I've got like 10 million naira of my own money, and I want a parcel of land, I want a plot of land from the government to build my own house. How easy is it for the common Nigerian, for ordinary Nigerians? It's not easy. Now, in Abuja, for instance, you have agencies, you have the FCDA, you have all these places that you go, that people go, they apply for land and all that. In fact, there are very, very few people that are even aware that you can just walk into an agency somewhere and apply for land. Why? Because it's not effective. Because if there are more people that are applying for this land and they are getting their locations, then it means more people get the information. And surprisingly, there's a lot of land everywhere, and there are lots of people that are looking for land. Now, it's just boxed into just a few corners, just for maybe a few developers that are able to just have their way and all of that and get it. And then they now sell it back to the people at a very, very exorbitant rate. So now, how at the national level, that national affordability I'm talking about, how is the government helping the situation? So there is need for like a dedicated agency, not the existing one that, you just go, you apply for a land and it takes like 20 years, like 50 years. Sometimes it's when the person that applied for the land is dead. That is when maybe the allocation comes out, if it ever even come out. And in the same breath, you now have some very few people, privileged people, that go apply for maybe the land and they get it the next week, they get it the next month. So now we need to talk of equity. We need to talk of fairness in the administration of the land, in land administration. We need to talk of how easy it can be made for ordinary citizens to acquire, to access the land. And then we talk of, infrastructural provision, development. Now, if the people are able to now access the land, they need a road to get to the land. They need electricity to live. They need water. You understand? They need a lot of things, all the necessary things that makes life dignified. Now, that is the responsibility of the government. And then, the discussion around national affordability is very, very wide. In fact, in all these lenses that I'm talking about, the personal, the market, the national, it's very, very wide. Like within this, national affordability I'm talking about, you even begin to talk of financing. You understand? Elsewhere, how people get a house and, own a house is not by buying a plot and begin to raise the blocks and stuff. They get it through mortgage financing. How easy it is in Nigeria to have mortgage financing. You understand? So now you have this kind of problem. Even the developers are not able to access funds, the necessary funds to develop. And so at the end of the day, it's easy for us to begin to kind of blame the developers that, okay, for a house that costs, let's say, 50 million to build, they're selling it for 200 million. It's easy for us to blame the developers. But there are other things that, are involved in even getting the finances to build the houses. And so, like I said in one of the episodes in the past, that the housing industry, it frustrates everybody. In fact, it frustrates everybody. So it's easy for us to blame one party leaving the other party, but even the party we are blaming too, they're not having it, finding it very, very easy. So there's need for us to have enough or like an easy access, to financing for developers, for individuals that want to build a house, since we now don't have a strong mortgage institutions or mortgage system in Nigeria, right? And so that is some of the issues or some of the discussions that we'll have around affordable housing. Like I said, the concept of affordable housing, one, is relative, it's subjective. And in all these lenses, in all these facets of the discussion that I'm having today in this episode, it's wide. It's very, very wide. there are so many things to talk about, but at the end of the day, we won't be able to squeeze them, do all this talk in one episode. And so I think there's just going to be need for subsequent discussions on this issue of affordability. Because when we say affordability, and the next thing that comes to our mind is maybe the materials, the cement and all of that. The next thing that comes to our mind is maybe the cost of plots, the cost of the houses, it goes way beyond that. And I think that the problem starts even way back, way before the concept of the building comes into the picture, before we conceive the building, like even before design, before we even think that, okay, I want to build a house. The problem of affordability has already started. It starts with the definition of what is truly an affordable housing. To whom is the houses affordable, right? And so I think at the end of the day that instead of us thinking about affordable housing as having to do with provision of more houses, I think we might as well begin to think about, are those houses that have been provided, are they serving the purpose? Are we able to provide the right houses for the people that truly need them? And so with this, we've come to the end of episode 3, and I implore you to follow our page. I implore you to subscribe to our channel, to our YouTube channel, and to follow our social media pages. And let's keep the conversations going.